I'm curious to hear where you've struggled the most with, kind of the mindset, the mental side of climbing.
I'm a really, really determined and goal-oriented person. And there's like a switch in my brain where as soon as I make the change in my brain to say that like this goal, this route, this trip, this experience is incredibly important to me, it's really hard for me to give up or for me to like walk away empty-handed. And, it might seem like from the outside, I just send everything that I try and it's always success, success, success or whatever. But the reality is that there's a lot of things that I've failed at even after continued attempts, or, thousands of dollars in airline tickets or trips or, whatever. And so, yeah, I think that's a little hard for me because I really take things pretty seriously, and I feel that that's part of the reason why I can have success, because I pivot pretty hard into the process of goal setting and preparation and arriving prepared and this kind of thing. And so basically the reason I say that that's been hard for me is because the reality is that there's gonna be failure, especially when you're really pushing yourself. And walking away from routes that I know from the macro perspective aren't really that important. Like I'll give you an example. So let's say that I go to a cliff and I'm there to climb like some really special 515 thing that I've been dreaming about and training about forever. Well, let's say that I decide to kind of warm up for the route. I decide to do some just like 513s or whatever to get my head in the game for that type of rock or whatever it is. If there's like an easier route there that really feels hard to me and maybe I can't do it in a day or a couple days or whatever it is, then I'll lose my motivation for the main project, and I'll feel like anything that's difficult for me, I have a really strong feeling that there's something to learn from that experience. And so I feel like, oh, well, this is the most important thing that I have going on because I've demonstrated that I can't do it and that there's something to learn and that I have to overcome something, and so sometimes it can be distracting, and that kind of like psycho dedication can actually work against me, because I know that from a logical perspective it'd be better to just move on because that's not why I'm there. And I've in working with Steve Bechtel, he's really helped me to kind of prioritize big goals and let all the other ones fall to the wayside if they're nothing less than like preparation. But even still, that can be hard for me. And I think that on top of all that, like I was just been mentioning throughout, that when I really accept something as a goal and it really means something to me and I prepare for it, like I really, really want to see it through. I think that there, like I said, there are just times when it doesn't go that way. And then it's a great opportunity for me to be introspective and to try and realign my goals and to realign, what I'm really after, and also kind of try and reframe this idea of failure. And I think that that's where a lot of like cool personal growth and emotional growth comes from in climbing, because the reality is that anyone you see out there that's like, elite and doing their best at climbing, they've run into a ton of roadblocks and a ton of experiences that didn't go as planned. And I think what separates the lifers, the ones that are around for decades versus the ones that are around for a season or two, is that ability to digest failure and to deal with like being committed to something and then basically having it fall through.
Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching these videos. Quick 30 seconds to tell you about the Patreon that I've started to help fund this massive operation running out of my podcast /YouTube /utility closet, which I'm coming to you from right here. Check out the Patreon down below. I've got pro clinics with some of the biggest names in the sport, exclusive for patrons, helping you learn how to level up in your training and your performance, all sorts of other bonus content. Appreciate your support. Check it out. Are there any perspective or mindset or mental exercises that you implement, or how do you essentially work through A, not knowing if something that you're going to do is actually going to go, and maybe preparing yourself mentally in a certain way for that, and then B, if it's not coming together in the desired amount of time. How do you work through that?
I'm very much still learning, as we all are. I think that the real balance is like, you're never going to achieve your absolute best, and you're certainly never going to achieve like, one of the hardest routes on earth, or, whatever pursuit it is that you're in, without being relentlessly determined and goal oriented, right? But at the same time, you need to operate in a kind of airy, light-hearted, uplifted place to actually see those things through. So that's why it's so hard, and it's always going to be the hardest element of climbing your best, is balancing that, like, I really, really care about this thing, and also, hey, you know what? I'm just out here doing my thing, trying to do my best. You know what I mean? Like, those two attitudes, I'm just like, today's great and it's beautiful. It's like, it's really difficult to have those two attitudes at the same time. But it's an awesome challenge. And it's like, I wish I could say that it gets easier and easier and easier, but it kind of doesn't. It's just like always still there. And to answer the question that you just posited, I think that, one of my like mantras that I always kind of try and tell myself and those around me is that, all you can do is try, right? Like, there's a lot of things that are outside of our control. Most anxiety, no matter what you're anxious about, is about something in the future. It's not about what's happening currently, right? What's in the present, and when you're at the cliff and when you're tying in, what really matters is you just honestly trying, and as long as you can tie in and leave the ground with the attitude of like, no matter what happens, I know my skin's kind of bad. I know the conditions aren't that great. I know today's my last day. None of that stuff is going to matter if you can't put a good effort on the wall. So I think that any way that you can get yourself to remember that the best method to the top is just to give it hell and just to really try and do your best, then everything else is kind of secondary, I think. And I do think that you can use that same attitude in the macro scale of just saying, maybe you spent a whole season trying a route and you didn't finish it, and you got to fly home now, or you've got to drive home, or, go back to school, or whatever it is. It's unquestionable that you learned something, and probably a lot of things from that experience that you can carry forward with you. So don't let that fleeting moment pass. Like, take an opportunity to say, what did I learn? Okay, at the very least, let me write down all my beta. At the very least, let me get like all the data that I need to know about like what the good conditions are, and make a note about that. Or like, hey, I met all these new people, or, I discovered, a way of respecting this route or this area that I hadn't before. There's always learning. And if you really, like, if I look back at like quote unquote failures that have happened in my climbing, like, they were all learning experiences. So years down the line, you're going to look back and it's just going to be a small piece of the overall puzzle. It's you moving towards the eventual best version of yourself. And that's kind of, failure is going to have to be a part of that. So you just have to kind of internalize it,